White bread. That's right, I'm very excited to show you what I think is a pretty close approximation to the white bread most of us grew up eating. While I usually do eat the nice healthy whole grain stuff like 95% of the time, a few times a year I do like to make a loaf of this, just to remind myself what I'm missing. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll begin by pouring some warm milk into a mixing bowl. And then on top of that, we will sprinkle 1 package of dry active yeast. And then we'll just let that sit for like 10 or 15 minutes to get a little bit of a head start. And then what we'll do after about 10 or 15 is continue on by adding 1 large beaten egg, as well as a little touch of white sugar, a little bit of white vinegar, and a little bit of baking soda. We will also need a little bit of salt, as well as a couple shakes of cayenne. And then we will finish up with some all-purpose flour and a few tablespoons of very soft, room temperature butter. And that's it. We'll go ahead and grab a dough hook and head to the mixer, where we're going to start kneading this dough on low speed. And as soon as everything kind of comes together and looks like this, we'll turn it up 1 notch, at which point we're going to give it about 3 or 4 minutes, or until we have a very smooth, very elastic, and as you can see, extremely wet and soft dough. And then, because this dough is so wet and sticky, we're not going to be able to knead this on the table like we usually do. So all that we're going to do is sort of clean up the sides with a spatula, at which point we're going to cover it and let it rise for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, or until it doubles in size. This is what mine looked like about 2 hours later. Here we're actually going to use a buttered spatula to scrape this right into our loaf pan, at which point we'll use our spatula to sort of spread that out and distribute it as evenly as possible. And then what we'll do once that's been accomplished is go ahead and sprinkle some flour over the top, at which point we'll give that a little gentle pressing. And then once that's set, we are just going to let that rise in the loaf pan. And as you can see, roughly 30 minutes later, mine had risen all the way to the top. And then what we're going to want to do, besides making sure our oven is preheated, is go ahead and take a sharp knife or razor and attempt to slice the middle of this loaf. Before this goes in the oven, we're going to brush the entire surface with melted butter. And that's it. Once the top's been brushed, that is ready to transfer into the center of a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so, or until it's baked to a beautiful golden brown, and hopefully looking something like this. And then, very important, as soon as this comes out, we want to brush it once more with melted butter. And then what we'll do once that's been brushed is let it cool in this pan for exactly 10 minutes before carefully removing it to a rack, where we will let it cool completely. Not almost cool, all the way down to room temp. So I went ahead and let mine cool for at least an hour before I went ahead and sliced in. And as usual, I was extremely happy with what I saw. And I spread on some butter so I could go in for the official taste. And all of a sudden, just like that, I was 7 years old again. And as good as that plain buttered piece was, this next piece that I toasted and then buttered before spooning on some jam was even more incredible. All right, there's buttered toast and jam, and then there's homemade white bread buttered toast and jam, which is like an entirely different thing altogether. And because the flavor is so neutral and the texture borderline non-existent, that's what makes it so great for things like sandwiches. In particular, for example, this California club. Which is why, even though I live in the land of the whole grain artisan loaf, I do like to take the occasional flight back to white. And I'm thinking you might just want to take a trip as well. Which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon.